Hello and welcome to the Buy, Sell, Hold Spotlight presented by Sports Car Market Magazine. I'm Darren Roberge. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Also be sure to join in the conversation and share your thoughts by leaving us a comment below. Our guest today is Andy Reid. He is partner at Hayden Wood Insurance Agency as well as a columnist and author for basically everyone. Welcome, Andy.
Thank you very much, Darren.
For those who may not know you, why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background?
Okay, so I'm a collector of cars, collector of motorcycles, collector vehicles. I started out with my first car when I was 15. Turned into my first Ferrari when I was 17. That's a whole other story, long story. And then got involved in film industry, then the internet industry, then got out of the internet industry and started really pursuing the world of collector cars as a full-time gig. I write about the cars I like, primarily sports and GT cars, which are my wheelhouse, as it were, and occasionally motorcycle stuff when those things come up.
One thing I didn't mention at the top of the show is you've been a pretty prevalent Concours judge. Your presence is well known around the world at various events. So how did you originally become a judge?
Well, I was working for Classic Motorsports, and 12 years ago or so, 11, 12 years ago, Hilton Head Concours said, "Hey, we'd like you to come judge as a guest judge." And I said, "Sure, I can do that." And I knew about cars. The key to judging is if you've restored a car, you learn about that car. The more cars you restore and go through the process in an involved manner, not in doing it yourself, but even just farming it out to name whatever shop. If you're involved in the process and learning about the car, about what's right and what's wrong, it gives you a really good eye for those cars and what's proper. And if you do the restoration correctly. And so I'd restored a bunch of cars and owned a bunch of cars. They said, "Hey, you want to judge this class?" And I said, "Sure." So I was a guest judge as a journalist. And they said at the end of the thing, "We'd really love you to come back next year." And I said, "Sure." And after that, I ended up judging at the Lime Rock Historic Festival and a lot of other venues as it went. And I just got asked to do it more and more and more. And they realized that I specialize in. I know Ferrari cars pretty darn well up through around 1992, 93, all the way back to late 50s, early 60s. I know British cars inside and out. I know Porsche 911s as good as anybody, probably up through 89, because I've owned the run. So I just got asked to do it more and more. And now I do about, I guess, 10 Concours events a year where I'm a judge. So just snowballs.
Snowballs indeed. So describe your approach when you're walking up to a car. Where do you start? What are you initially looking for? Give the viewers and the listeners kind of a general idea as you, a Concours judge, like what you're looking for when you first approach a car.
Well, I'm looking for, cleanliness is one thing, but I'm looking for, is it right for what it is? It doesn't have the right, at an initial glance, does it look, say you have 10 cars in a class, what we tend to do is you kind of walk the field of your cars and you can kind of get an idea of where things are going to fall. There's always three or four cars that are exceptional. And there are 3 or 4 cars that are really good. Then there's 2 or 3 cars that are just okay. They're still good, but they're not in the same category of cars. In an ideal world, they give you those cars in advance. And so you can do that. Occasionally you get a class where everything, like case in point is this year at Amelia. The Le Mans class was ridiculous. It was just ridiculous. XKD 501, which is the 56 Le Mans winning 1955 D-Type by Akira Cross, won nothing. In my footer of my emails, it says my favorite car, my dream car is XKD 501. So I have a serious affinity for that car, and it didn't win anything. So, but for the most part, you walk through the class and you go, okay, that one's not the right color, even though it's supposed to be polo red, it's off, or those wheels never came on it, or whatever, those tires are completely the wrong size. And so you can size it up a little bit.
You mentioned Amelia Island, obviously, a premier North American event. What's on your calendar, worldwide, locally, whatever you want to call it, as being, the list of the can't miss events?
I think Amelia's for sure. I mean, Haggerty has elevated that event in amazingly great ways. The cars on the field were astounding this year. The event itself, all the outlying events to go with it, the gala, best gala of any Concours on the world right there because it's casual and fun. After that, Greenwich Concours is a good East Coast Concours. I go to that every year. I highly recommend it as well. I've never been to Detroit, but it's supposed to be interesting. I don't know. It may be. I go to Cincinnati. It's a nice, more of a folksy Concours, but it's got some really amazing cars and some really, really good people behind it. Monterey, of course, is a no-brainer. And the many different Concours and show events that happen at Monterey. It's like the Uber thing. To me, it's a can't miss. I think Amelia and Monterey are the can't misses. Hilton Head at the end of the year. I love Hilton Head. It's kind of the nice way to close off the year in October, November. And we get to see all our friends for the last time until maybe we see some of them in Arizona, but we'll more than not, we'll see them in Amelia. First time we'll see them again is in Amelia. And that's kind of a nice kind of get to family, kind of a car hobby get together for the car family. So.
Do you have a favorite judging moment that you've experienced so far?
Yeah, I had a time. I got to judge Jaguars with Ian Callum, which was really interesting. Ian, for those that don't know, Ian Callum was the head of design for Jaguar for years and is also a Jaguar collector of classic Jaguars himself and huge fan of his work from when he was at Aston and at Jaguar. And was just amazing because his eye as a designer was just very, very neat to be with. And, I also got to judge with David Hobbs one year at David Hobbs and Joachim Maas at Lime Rock. I mean, it was just phenomenal. And it was just and they also, their level of knowledge with the cars, but more than not, the other thing was we were judging competition cars and people's reaction to getting to meet these guys was just watching people. Cause at the end of the day, it's all about the people of this hobby. And when you see people go and one of those two gentlemen is saying nice things about their car, they're over the moon. And it's just a really cool thing to be part of that, to elevating someone's day to that level and making them feel just that much more special about the thing they've invested time, money, and effort into.
Yeah, it's an amazing component of Concours culture, certainly. And you've been a part of many of those for people too, I'm sure. So in the amount of time that you've been involved with the Concours scene and judging and so on, what do you think has changed in that time?
Well, I see Jag Rule Sets comes out, which is a much more thorough mechanical check of the cars. And there's a lot of people on both sides of this. And I was on one side and I'm kind of in the middle at this point. One of the interesting things at a couple Concours I've been at lately is that there were no mechanical checks done on the car. And people think, French rules, you don't have to run the car. But, even though it's maybe a beautiful steel sculpture, to me, at the end of the day, it's a car and it needs to run. And part of the beauty of like an old Ferrari or an old Jag or an old Porsche is the sound. And by eliminating that, I think it's a mistake. And another thing that's happened lately is there's been a lot of push to have younger judges in the Concours ranks judging. I think it's really important. But I think that the key is to mentor those people, train those people, and have them go in as apprentice judges. And I think it requires, even before they come in, for them to have some car knowledge ahead of time for that to work properly.
Yeah, I think the transfer of information between generations is something that is crucially important to keeping this hobby going into the future. And, I think both parties are ready to do it. It's just a matter of creating the structure in order for that to occur. So speaking of the future, where do you think the Concours scene is headed 5, 10, 15 years down the road from now?
I think it's going to look very, very different. I love full classic cars. Do I want one? No. Do I have expertise in judging them outside of Rolls-Royce Bentley? No. Pre-war Alpha can do, but that's a sports car. But for the most part, I won't say I don't care about them, but they're not cars even if I had unlimited budgets, I would be going to buy. I think a lot of these Packards, Duesenbergs, Cords, Sauchek body Delahaye's are completely museum bound. And that's going to change the way these events look. I think that we need to quickly think about that. Unless you want every car in the pre-war full classic class to be represented by a museum, we need to start modifying that a little bit and maybe moving more sports cars into it. Amelia is an interesting test bed because they've done some of that already. I don't know that we know what this looks like yet. We're definitely seeing these collections of these big cars being sold off because people are passing away or they're too old to deal with them. So those one collector doesn't have 26 full classics anymore. That's not, and the young collectors aren't buying cars that way. They're not accumulating 20 cars. They're accumulating 4 or 5 cars and using them until they've done what they want to do with them and then moving them on and doing 4 or 5 more cars. So it's in a very cyclical manner. And it's a very different way of ownership versus the older collector who accumulated and held. People go, well, I know 5 people who are 30 who love pre-war cars. So do I, but there aren't 50. Because the thing about younger collectors, and I guess I almost fall into that realm sometimes, even though I'm old, I'm 56, is that we like to use our cars. We're end users and we're more into driving than showing. So it has to be a usable mechanism. And I think V16 Cadillacs are fantastic pieces of engineering, but they are no fun to drive. They are big, heavy, long cars that turn like a truck. They turn like a school bus as far as turning radius go. So as a driving car, they are not enjoyable. Now people are going to yell at me for saying that, but I've driven them. I've driven really good ones and they're nerve wracking because they're so big and you're worried about every corner of the car and they're just not for me and they're not for most of my friends. And so I think that's going to change the way these things look.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to be more sort of like design studies and tributes to the manufacturing process from back then, which does relegate them that way. And you think about things like the SCM 1000 and other similar rallies and how they've become so popular lately. It's very difficult to take a V16 Cadillac on a 1,000-mile drive someplace. Your brakes aren't going to do it. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But from the aspect of design and style and the artistry behind those cars, I mean, it's very hard to beat, but from a usability standpoint, it's a challenge. Speaking of usability, let's kind of circle over and talk about your day job a little bit here. You are the insurance guy, or one of them, certainly. So why don't you kind of describe the process for anybody who's new about what collector car insurance is, how it works, how somebody would work with somebody like you? Kind of just give us the overview of the collector car insurance thing.
If you have a collector car, and a collector car there's not an age cap on that. If you have a Bugatti Veyron, it's a collector car. If you have a McLaren, it's a collector car. If you have a 918 Porsche, it's a collector car. If you have a Boxster GTS that's not your daily driver, that 1516 Boxster GTS is a collector car, as is the Mazda Miata. If you have one of these cars, it's a secondary car. If you don't have collector car insurance, which is a agreed value insurance product through somebody, Haggerty, AIG, Chubb, Grundy, you name whoever it is, I write for all those guys, then you're doing it wrong. State Farm might give you a great quote, and you might have had a great claim one time, but they fundamentally do not understand what you have. I would want to be with a carrier that understands when I say, wow, I've got a 1958 BMW 507. They go, oh, really? One of 272 cars? Yes, that's the one. What is it, a series 1 or 2? I want those questions because then they get what I have and they understand what it is. And, I have a State Farm home policy. I would not ever put my cars there. Once I learned about collector car insurance, which I was at barrett-jackson in 2001. And I was at the Haggerty booth at Barrett, and I ran into McKeel, who was at the booth because he was working the booth back then, and a guy named Robert Kunzelman, who works in underwriting or investigations or something now, who was just an insurance guy then. And they wrote my first policy on the 911 and the Alpha I had. And and I was like, I never went back because collector car insurance policy with agreed value policy, the car gets totaled. Whatever you've agreed to, and the agreed value means you and the insurance company have come up with a number that is what that car is set. You've agreed to what it's worth. So if there's a total loss and you insure your Healy 100M for $200,000, they're going to write you a check for $200,000.
So how is that initial value even established in the first place? Kind of explain the process of that. And then obviously, we know what agreed value is based on what you just said, but, where's the starting point for this? And then how does appreciation factor in? Obviously, a lot of us are in this to make money, and that's a crucial component of collector cars in general. So where do you kind of go from A to B, from the starting value to where it may potentially go at some point, and how do you continue to monitor that?
Well, with my agency, we're interesting. We monitor our clients. We go through our clients' files quarterly and make sure everybody's at the right value or within it, somewhere around it. And we do that with all of our clients quarterly, all of them. So we know where they are. If they are low or high, we make adjustments and we go say, hey, your 300 SL Roadster that you had at 1.1 is now worth 1.8. They go, what? They go, look at the prices. And that's what we tell them. But as far as coming up with the value, people do this all the time. It's, well, I paid 40 for it. That's great. What would it cost to replace that car? Oh, well, it would cost 50. Would it? How fast? And then I go, what are the full costs to replacing that car? What do you mean? Well, how much time are you going to spend looking at cars? Are you going to get on an airplane to look at cars? Are you going to pay some guy to do PPIs? What's that number? Well, it's probably 80. Then you should insure your Healy 3000 for 80. No, well, it's only worth 45. People do this all the time. Well, here's the thing. Many insurance companies have the ability to call the car a total loss if the value of that car's repair, the cost of that repair is 65% of the value of what you have it insured for. So say you have a Healy 100M, which is worth an easy $1.50 right now. Easy for a good one. And you have it insured at 70, like some people have. Well, I bought it for 79 years ago and I've seen them for that. And the car is hit by a truck and it's an aluminum body that folds up like a pretzel and the chassis bent. And you want to fix it because it was your dad's. They're going to get you a check for your 70 because you're well over the cost. And they're going to go, well, I want to fix it. Well, here's your 70. And then you're going to quickly find out that it costs 150 to fix it. Because restoring, the rule of thumb is restoring a car that's smushed is a lot of money. So it behooves you to not over-insure, but to max it out. And the way I come up with value is I look at the Hagerty price guide, I look at SCM's price guide, I look at comps at auctions, and I also look at comps in private sales. What are people asking for them on ClassicCars.com or Auto Trader Classics or Classics.com, all these different things. I put that data together and go, okay, I just did a 330 GT 2+2 for a guy. And I'm like, let's insure it at 4 because to buy this car is 4. Okay. And the insurance companies, the collector car insurance companies, they know that too. Unless you go crazy and you say, wow, I want to insure my 1977 911 for $350,000. And they go, well, why? Well, because this minor celebrity who was a Love Boat guest in 1981 owned it. And that makes it special. No, it doesn't. What's it worth? It's because people go other way too. And so you can definitely go the other way.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the sentimental nature of collector cars in general and how nostalgia is such a major component of doing this. I mean, the reality is that some cars aren't really necessarily replaceable for anything close to what the book is on them. Example, like you said, dad's car or whatever. I mean, if say the car gets stolen or whatever, you don't want another car that's the same. You want your car back if you can get your car back. And so, I mean, I think having a stout approach to establishing value is critically important. So moving on to collections, a lot of SEM readers and watchers and listeners of the show are big collectors that have multiple cars under one roof or several roofs. So how do you approach collections generally?
Well, I look at the whole, I say, I need to know everything that's here. I need to then know how it's stored. I then need to know how it's used. And then I said, if you have purchase prices, I'd love them, but you don't have to give them to me. I can dig them up. What are they insured for now? What condition are they in? In an ideal world, I'm like, with a big, let's say it's 80 cars, 100 cars. I'm like, may I come out for 3 days? Sure, we'd love to have it. Great. So I will fly out there for 3 days and go through the collection and not basically do a rough and tough appraisal of what's going on and what it looks like and how it's stored and what condition the cars are in, which gives me a better idea of it. And collections are great because you can insure them differently. If you have, say you have an MGB and a Jaguar E-Type, you're going to be under a standard collector car insurance policy. If you've got $1 million of cars or more, I think it's $600,000 in cars or more, you can do what's called you can write in many states, not all states, you can write what's called an inland marine policy on those. What it does is you go, okay, the aggregate value of this collection is $34 million. So what you're effectively, and they're all broken down by how much is each is worth in a schedule. But you go, okay, here's a $34 million policy that covers these for physical damage. And then after that, what you do, so you have the $34 million car coverage that covers it for the physical damage. And it covers all of them. And then you have a separate policy for liability. That is basically, it's not like a liability policy per car. It's a blanket liability policy because it makes the assumption you can't drive more than one car at once. So it becomes a very cost-effective way to do it because you're actually insuring the thing kind of like you would insure art. And that's how art collections are insured. And it gives you a lot of benefits. But you have the problem is that you have to be able to have the value of a collection to insure it that way. So if you have $100,000 in cars, you can't do it. But if you have $600,000 or $1 million in cars, things get very interesting at that point.
Certainly. So what happens if you have like a staff mechanic or you have somebody that helps you maintain your collection, or would they be covered under that too? Or would they be an addition, or how does that work?
They would be scheduled. They would be part of the insure. They would be covered under the policy as an additional driver or whatever the heck they do. You'd say this guy does X and he would be on the policy in some way, shape or form to protect you and him.
So does it matter then if the cars are stored under different roofs or if they're in storage facilities, or just how does storage factor into this?
Well, it's going to change. It's going to all the storage, and we don't insure anything that's not stored under with central station fire and burglar alarms. No one should an outside storage or even their own storage. It should have that. With bigger collections, it's critical. We love cameras too. Cameras are cheap now. For $500, you can go to Best Buy and get a bunch of cameras, and it's an effective thing. Central station fire burglar is critical. With big collections that are very, very valuable, we're like, hey, how about sprinklers? We usually don't have to even do that because they've already installed them. So that's a nice thing. Multiple locations is no issue. We have a lot of collections that are in multiple locations because there's not a building big enough to hold 300 cars and be able to get them in and out where it's a usable thing, where it's not Tetris, because you don't want Tetris either. I've had Tetris with my own cars, and when you have to pay Tetris to get the car out of the corner, it's no fun. So
definitely one of the pitfalls of collecting a lot of cars. So a lot of people that have collections like this, or a lot of people that are involved in this stuff, they have cars, motorcycles, boats, etc. Can those all be looped under one policy, or do those need to be separated by kind of what the category is, or how does that work?
Oftentimes, depends if they're collectible boats and things. They can throw inland marine. You throw a marine policy on top of it, like effectively a marine liability policy. So yeah, there's ways to do that. Airplanes is different. You can't do airplanes. You could probably put like if you had a P-51 Mustang or a Supermarine Spitfire, you could put that under the inland marine for physical damage, but you're probably better off getting a primary aviation product for that thing because, they're really expensive, and because they're old and people still fly them. And if it's just a display piece, sure, I know you could put it under that same policy. If it's going to be take to the air and fly, it's a whole different situation. So, and it's critically expensive. It's really expensive.
Yeah. So out in the field, so to speak, I kind of hear the same complaints a lot about collector car insurance, and some of these things have been phased out, I think, at this point. But a couple things in particular is how are things like traveling to Concours, general transportation, going on rallies, vintage racing, how is that stuff covered? And the big one is, do mileage limits still exist? That seems to be the big thing that everybody wants to complain about with collector car insurance all the time.
Here's the funny thing. It's like, I'm going to talk the mileage limits first. Okay. So most of my friends have 10 or more cars, and they're not that they're expensive. They just have 10 or more collector cars. Let's round it down. Let's say 8 cars. And whenever I say, hey, how much mileage are you going to put on your cars a year? Oh, $5,000 miles per car. So you're going to put 40,000 miles on your collector cars. Oh yeah. The thing is, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, I mean, what mileage limits do is they ensure you're not driving it to work. It's dumping snow out here. They're ensuring that you're not driving your aluminum bodied, steel framed Aston Martin DB5 to work in the snow or in crappy weather, or parking it on the street in front of Circle K every day as you go to work, get your coffee. That's what they don't want you doing. So that's the thing with mileage limits. they're kind of a thing of the past. People still ask for them, but it's just it's kind of an insurance policy for the insurer to know that you're not driving them daily. I've got mileage limits on everything because I've got, 8 collectible motorcycles, and I initially had them unlimited, and it saves you a couple bucks. And I brought it way down because I'm like, wow, I did a total of 1,000 miles on these bikes. Huh. Okay. Because my reality is that there are cars here as well. And then I'm at a lot of events. And so when do I get to use these things? But I'll tell you this. So I've got a client who had a 1963 big tank fuelie split window Corvette that was 100% original. Paint, all of it. Don Top winner, plaques as tall as you or I, Darren, as far as the Don Top Preservation Awards. Perfect car. Got damaged in transport. Here's how it got damaged. There was a Chevy on top of it because they parked it on the bottom that dripped brake fluid, .3, all over the front of the car. And as we all know, .3 eats paint and ruined it. The insurance company, I called them up and said, here's the thing. It was obviously a big insurance. That's an expensive Corvette. So it was under it's under a PCS private client thing with the insurance company. And they paid to fix the car. They did all that stuff. They also paid what's called diminished value. And diminished value, if you have a really high-end policy like that, diminished value is a thing. Is that car worth less now that it's been repainted and it was 100% original? Absolutely. So diminished value kicks in when that happens. And if you have the right insurance policy, diminished value claims come in with specifically, this really affects, for the most part, unrestored cars or cars that need tremendous body. Like you need to rebody your Ferrari or whatever else, and it never needed to be rebodied before. Obviously affects, if you rebody your Ferrari 250 California Spider because it got smushed hard and it couldn't be saved, that has a negative effect on the value, millions of dollars worth, or can be millions of dollars worth. But that's what diminished value does. And that's when the companies in our space that we rewrite with do a really good job.
Yeah. And I mean, that's one of the foremost reasons why you need to have a company that legitimately understands the hobby and understands what's going on. Cause candidly, if you've got a NCRS rated, all original, Corvette, you're going to have real trouble getting your value out of it. Actually, that's something that happened to me with my first collector car that I had it was almost entirely original car, and somebody dripped brake fluid on it, and then it got stolen, and the value was just completely cratered by all the replacement parts that the standard insurance company was trying to offer me to make the car right. So very, very important to have all that stuff in line. And it's one of the reasons why you definitely want to have a collector car focused policy backing you when you're out doing stuff. So rallies and vintage racing. How does insurance approach those things? Do they approach those things? What's the strategy there?
A rally is just using your car in the way it was meant to be used. So that's again, what we like to tell our clients. We're different. We're very much of a concierge situation. We watch our policies like hawks for changes in the market. We also there say one of our clients goes, hey, I'm really never been to Arizona auctions. Can you tell me where I should stay and what I should do? Sure. Here's 3 or 4 hotels you can stay at. Here's a schedule of what's going on, and here's what you might like to do. So we do that as well. We also, to a certain degree, someone goes, well, I'm thinking about changing up my collection. Do you have any ideas on that? And so that gets sent to me, and I'm like, well, what are you bored of? And, and so they go this and this. Well, what are you looking for? Well, this and this. I'm like, sure. Here's what I would do. And here are some people you should talk to outside of us to make that happen. Because we insure a lot of dealers and brokers. And so, but we only here's our rule at our insurance company. We only insure people we like. And we write Haggerty, we write Grundy, we write all these people, but we are our own brokerage. And we don't work for the insurers. We work for the insureds. So we're always working for you no matter what happens. And we will go to the wall for you because we work for you and because we vetted you. So we actually, what's interesting we have a product that will cover vintage racing under a number of parameters for on-track damage. We're the only place that does that for on-track wheel-to-wheel damage. If people are interested in that, they can contact me, but it's not just writing a single policy. There's a lot more to it, but we can do it. We're able to do this. And we've had some claims and it always works fine. Again, the cost is not inexpensive. If you've got a TR3 or a 300Z, it makes no sense. None. But if you got something valuable like a D-type, C-type, 250, 330 series Ferrari, 750, 860 Monza, 100%, it makes complete sense to do this. So that's a different story, and we're kind of unique in the space that we can actually write that stuff. I don't know if anybody else can do it because we've kind of created a product for it that tags with other products. But rallies is just rallies. You're just using your car as it was intended. We like our clients to say, are you going on the Mille Miglia? Great. Tell us so we know that it's there. Make sure that it's covered in Europe and the transport's covered to and from. So, and usually those
up, and that's why that individual touch and that is crucial, especially in a space like this where the assets that are being insured are so valuable. Okay, Andy, you're one of the world's foremost collector car experts, not only from the standpoint of showing, but buying, but insuring, but valuing, you name it, you do it. So let's talk buy, sell, hold. Go.
Buy. I'm about to file a story on it. Buy a Dodge Viper. If you're a younger buyer, a newer buyer, 20s, 30s, 40s, if you're in your 60s, if you have not bought one of these cars, buy one. Ideally, a Dodge Viper first generation GTS coupe. These cars are America's supercar. People say, oh, there's a Ford GT. Yeah. But the Dodge Viper was hand built in Detroit for its entire run. People forget that. From 1992 to the late 2010, this is a handmade car in Detroit. The GTS won Le Mans when it went there for the cost of Porsche's flower budget. Serious statistic. True story. I think it's a great thing. Sell. Wow. I think, yeah, I like them too. Little British sports cars primarily, and they've been going up a lot. But if you got an MGB for 10 and it's worth 20, 25 right now, and it could well be even rubber bumper ones, and you're tired of it, move it out. Make it go away. Unless you still love it. I don't think the biggest mistake I've ever made with cars is selling things before I was done with them. I sold my Aston Martin DBS before I was done with it. I still miss the car and it's worth 5 times what I sold it for. And I hate that. My specific car sold for 5 times what I sold it for, and I sold it for good money. So, if you're not done with it, don't sell it. But if you're done with it, move it on. And I think the Little British sports cars, an additional one on that is TCs, TDs, TFs. The newer they get, the better they are. But the LBCs, I think they're primitive. They're not very usable. So I usually pick on Tri-5 Chevys, but those are usable cars. So hold. Wow. I think not any special colored, special spec'd Porsche 911 car is a really interesting thing. And, the big joke right now, we were at the Porsche, we were at Cars and Coffee at Amelia, and it's like, special order, paint to sample, Viper green, paint to sample, Viper green, paint to sample, Carrera, Mexico blue. The rare one was like the Guards red car, right? But period cars from like the mid 60s through the late 80s, 89, the original 911 all the way through the end of the 3.2 Carreras, I think are a hold. I also think that specifically within that range, I think that the 1983 only 911 SC Cabriolet is the rarest Porsche 911 spec car of the G-bodied era. It never got more lower production than that. It's a unique car. It's just 1 year only. It was Porsche's first cabriolet since the 356C Cabriolet of 1965. They are probably the most bulletproof and one of the best built 911s in the world, and the top goes down. And they are the cheapest 911 SC you can buy right now. And if you've got one, don't dump it for the 40,000 bucks it's worth, because I think they should be worth 70 or 80. I mean, I really do. They're too rare and they're too good a car.
Yeah, I mean, I agree across the board on this. The Viper, for me, I think is an absolute sleeper still at this point, and people can be getting into those things for how much? What do you think somebody should pay for one of those right now?
For a convertible, you could spend $45,000-$50,000. For a nice GTS, you're spending probably 90 to a buck and a quarter. Unless it's like a Le Mans edition, then you're probably a buck and a half. But even then, for what you're buying, my God, the production is stupid low, and the story is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, ultra low production. They're monsters on the road too, but they're vintage enough to where they're still fun, but they're modern enough to where they don't completely kill you. I guess, except for maybe the RT10, which deliberately tries to kill you every time you turn it. But
ACRX can kill you. I mean, it's a car that it's the only car I was able to spin in a straight line was an ACRX, and which is a fully developed Viper. They kind of do want to kill you. There's still enough analog that you can really get in a bad situation, but I think it's great. I think it's a genius thing about them. They really require you to take a very serious approach to driving them, much the way 930s do.
Yeah, I agree. I love Vipers. I think that they're going to go up. And I think as more people kind of figure out what they're about for real, the value just increases on those. The desire increases on those. And same thing with those 911s. We talk a lot about 911 values on this show, and where everybody thinks they're going to kind of stop someplace, but then they never do. And it seems the SC has been sort of one of the ones, in addition to the 993s that we've talked a lot about lately, where you're right. I mean, they're a great driving car, and they're bulletproof, and they're reliable, and you know, they're fun enough to where they're interesting, or fast enough to where they're interesting, but they handle great still. They kind of do everything that you want a 911 to do. And when you talk the low production of something like what you're talking about, I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer. Like, buy that car, enjoy that car, and it'll probably keep rewarding you financially, you know, down the line, as long as you want to hang on to it. Also worth noting really quick, we talked a little bit about motorcycles throughout this year. You are the CEO of Classic Avenue, which is essentially sort of the bring a trailer version for motorcycle enthusiasts. Why don't you kind of give us the rundown on that, and where people can learn more there?
Yeah, well, they can for learning more, they can go to classicavenue.com. My partner and I, Nick, have sold things on Bring a Trailer, sold bikes on Bring a Trailer, and gone through the process there. We saw a hole in the market space that wasn't being filled. Motorcycle buyers are different than car buyers. It's a very different kind of a collector. But the most interesting car collectors are those that have motorcycles too, because they combine this two different mindsets. They tend to be more hands-on with things and more get your fingers dirty. We've been doing a couple soft launch auctions lately, but we launched our first bigger auction to really blow it out to people today, which is, what is the date? The 14th of March.
Mm-hmm. It's a fascinating website, and the newsletters are great. It's one of those emails that as soon as I see it come through on my phone, I open it immediately. I mean, I'm a motorcycle guy. I got 5 motorcycles. I know that a lot of car guys are also motorcycle guys as well. So if it's something that you're into, it's definitely worth checking out.
We do it differently. We don't do like a rolling run of motorcycles. We'll do an auction for a week, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll put bikes up for preview, just like you do at a brick and mortar auction, and you preview them for a week or 2 weeks, depending on how many bikes there are. And then we do the auction again. It's not a constantly running auction because there's so much noise out there, and it's hard to see above that noise. There's so much to look at. We wanted to make it a little less noise impact for people and take that brick and mortar approach to an online space.
We'll throw a link to it down in the bio so people can check it out if they want to. Any final thoughts?
Buy cars you love, go to events, do stuff, drive your car, drive your cars. Don't ever let someone convince you to buy a car because you're going to make money on it. If you don't like the car, never buy it. I've done that before. It doesn't go right. Buy what you love, and your friends think it's stupid. Too bad. It's your choice, and it's your thing. Like, I want to buy a Renault Fuego, and at some point I'm going to buy one, even though they're a hopeless pile of junk, but I want one. And all my friends think I'm an idiot, and I'm okay with that. I'm going to own my Fuego. So, just let your opinion's what counts. The rest of it doesn't.
We've covered a lot here today. So where can you send people if they want to learn more about anything that we discussed?
You can go to haydenwood.com, which is my insurance website. You can go to my Facebook page, which is Andy Reid on Facebook. Can't miss it. Don't Google me. You'll come up with some football coach from some football team that might have won the Super Bowl, and which is not me. And so that's where I'm at. And at any major event, you'll see me walking around usually. So,
yep, you're a hard guy to miss, and you're absolutely everywhere all the time with a big smile and excited to see people, excited to talk about cars. I would like to thank Andy Reid for joining us today. To learn more about anything that we talked about here, be sure to pick up the latest issue of Sports Car Market Magazine by visiting the link in the video description down below. As a reminder, if you enjoyed this content, please take a moment to like and share, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay on top of future episodes. I'm Darren Roberge. Thank you for joining us on the Buy, Sell, Hold Spotlight.